Hey, it's Raymond, and for the last few years I've been developing Project Feline, a movement-based game where you can run on walls, grind on rails, and slide down slopes. Developing these mechanics was quite challenging, and one thing I've noticed a lot is that the movement, while functional, doesn't necessarily feel great. To address this problem, I gutted the entire movement of the game and rebuilt it into a momentum-based movement system like the one from Titanfall 2. And I did this without typing a single line of code. How did I do that? Why did I do that? All this and more coming up on this episode of Project Feline. Hey, Raymond here, and I want to talk to you guys about something important. Hoodie Gabby. Hoodie Gabby. We all love Hoodie Gabby, but what if we put Hoodie Gabby on Hoodie? That's right, Hoodie Gabby on Hoodie. It's a thing, we did this. Not only is Hoodie Gabby on Hoodie, Hoodie Gabby is also on shirt. And Hoodie Gabby is on mug. I drink a fair bit of coffee to get through the day. You can drink whatever you'd want, but whatever you pick, whatever you decide to put in this mug, it's gonna taste better because Gabby's in there doing her magic, making the best drink for you. So, if you'd like to support the development of Project Feline, please consider checking out the limited time Hoodie Gabby merch. I had a lot of fun designing it, and I hope that you have a lot of fun wearing it. ProjectFeline.com/shop, available for a limited time, so you gotta be quick. Thanks for supporting the channel. Now, before we get into the specifics, if you've been following this game, you might be wondering, why? Why do any of this? You've already got movement, you've already got wall running, you've already got parkour in the game. Why do it again? Now, to answer that question, we gotta roll back the clock to December 2020. At this time, I had put out a devlog and a new build of the game. And at that time, I was at a critical point in the project. I had spent considerable time trying to develop a solid prototype with a solid foundation, starting with, of course, the core gameplay mechanics. And once I had those up, I did a lot of experimenting with level design. And if you had watched my devlogs that year, you would have seen me go through the process of learning how to create levels and adding more refinements to the mechanics. Now, given the amount of options there were, it was quite tough to figure out where to go. There are so many things that are viable and so many things that could work. It's just a matter of picking which one. Now, at the time I had put that build out, I'd done my best to progress forward, but I still didn't quite know where I wanted to take the project over the next year. But I did know that there were some problems with the game's foundation that I wanted to address. I was able to identify three main problems with the game at that point. The first of which being the movement still felt quite rigid and flimsy. In this early stage, bugs are to be expected, but we're talking things that are a bit more foundational. I personally found that while the movement was functional on like a bare minimum level, it didn't quite have the finesse I wanted to, and it didn't quite feel as good as I was hoping it to. A famous example of this is that when Gabby performs a wall run or a grind, she travels at a fixed speed, and I think it would certainly be nice to build some kind of momentum-based system to create more fluid feeling movement. The second issue I found was with the level design. Now, when building a movement-based game, there comes a lot of issues in regards to pacing and layout. A lot of these levels were quite experimental, and while it was interesting to explore different avenues of what was possible, I felt that I needed to be a lot more decisive as to the direction of the level design, whether there was going to be short linear levels or big open levels. The third issue I found was that the game still very much felt like a prototype, and while it is in its early stages, I think it is important to establish that vision quite early and work towards that. And I don't feel that there was enough in the build, not in mechanics necessarily, but just with the overall look. I felt that I still had a way to go in regards to establishing the general vibe of the game. So those were the three issues: fixing up the movement, making it more solid, being decisive as to the level design approach I wanted to take, and better communicating the overall aesthetic and vibe of the game. So those were the goals I had set, and while I haven't been very active on the internet this year, I have spent the last 7 or 8 months working really hard to try and address these key things. So the story of what's been going on in the last 7 months is going to be split up into 3 different devlogs, each covering one of those core issues. And in this episode, we will be addressing the movement and core mechanics. So in pursuit of addressing the movement, it ultimately led to me creating something approximating the movement from Titanfall or Apex Legends. And you might say, now hold on, how did you do that without writing any code? And I did that using Unreal Engine's Blueprint visual scripting system, and I've actually built my entire game using this. I know it's not recommended, but as someone with an artist background and not much programming experience, I found it very helpful to get my game up and running. So blueprints were a huge help, but I still acknowledge that creating a system like this would probably be very challenging. So to build up my competency a bit more, I found some smaller problems with the movement that I thought to address first. For example, some of the movement was a bit unfair, and I thought perhaps adding things like a ledge grab or a climb might help make the game a bit more fair. So I decided to work on those first and then work my way up to being able to create a momentum-based movement system like the one in Titanfall 2 or Apex Legends. I started this development sprint by adding a ledge grab system, and this is a feature that had been requested for some time. I certainly had it on my mind for a while. I just didn't really know how to go about doing it, because I didn't want to do a system where I had to put trigger boxes over the entire level for the ledge grab to work. I really wanted something that could just work on any ledge without me having to do much else. That was probably the most challenging part of this mechanic, was just teaching Gabby what a ledge was and then knowing what to do with a ledge once one was found. After getting the ledge detection to work, the next trick was to get her to hold onto the ledge and then being able to pull up the ledge or jump off the ledge or to let go of the ledge. And doing that part was quite easy. To get her to pull up the ledge, I simply just set her on like a timeline vector path, move her up on top of the ledge, and then to let go, I just exit the ledge grab state and then she just falls to the floor. So now if Gabby's ever in a situation where she makes a jump and just narrowly misses a platform, she can now grab onto that platform, pull herself up, and keep going. As it turns out, a vault system actually works in a very similar way to a ledge grab once you've got the detection working. So I decided, hey, a vault might be fun to add. Let's try doing that. So I took the logic of ledge detection from the ledge grab and recontextualize it to work as a vault so that Gabby could go up to something about knee height and vault over it. Now granted, I didn't think about this mechanic a lot, but it just seemed like a really fun thing to add. Now during this period, I had made a lot of obstacles for the levels, and we'll talk about that in the next video, but I thought it'd be really cool to have an obstacle that Gabby would move towards to instead of avoid. When Gabby approaches a vaultable surface, she will automatically vault over it without you having to touch anything. I thought it'd be kind of nice to have it automatic. I felt like having a manual vault might be a little too punishing, because it's not a good feeling when you run up to like a bench and then she just stops. I think it kind of feels bad. So she will automatically vault over it. However, if you want to play it a bit cooler and do some extra magic with it, if you press the shift key, she can actually perform a boost and get even more speed after doing a vault, but you have to time it right, so it requires a bit of skill. She can also springboard off vaultable things as well, and that happens when, during a vault, you press the jump button, and then she'll do like a springboard off of the object. And I thought, yeah, just having some of those around the level might be fun, add a bit of variety. And it wasn't too much more work to add that in, as most of the detection code was just recycled from the ledge grab stuff. And that's the kind of thing I really like about programming, is that if you think about it the right way, there are a lot of things that can serve multiple purposes or solve multiple problems. So finding that little connection was quite cool. The next feature I added was a wall climb feature. I think this particular feature helps mitigate a certain issue that a lot of players had, where in a wall running game, you kind of need to have a fair bit of verticality, especially if you want to gain height and stay off the ground. The way people would do that a lot of the time is they would do this little exploit where you can basically zigzag up a wall to gain verticality. And I thought, well, that's kind of neat, but it feels kind of glitchy. Why don't I add in an actual feature that kind of does that, but properly? So I added a wall climb. So now when Gabby goes up to a wall, if she's facing head on the wall, and if you're holding down the forward key, she will climb up it for a little bit. I think this also complements the ledge grab really well, because now you can have situations where if you want to get that extra verticality, you can start climbing up a wall, grab onto that ledge, and pull yourself up. and I think it flows together quite nicely. Now, on to the meat of the new changes. I'd added all this stuff, and I still wanted to add in the new momentum stuff, and I figured I'd probably procrastinated enough at that point. So I had put those new mechanics aside, and then I started focusing on revamping the core movement. I tried to start with the easiest thing first, because there's a few different movement modes that Gabby has. She can walk, she can slide, she can run on walls, and she can grind on rails. Now, I think the last two probably would have been the most difficult, so I started with the basics. I just thought, let's get her walking, just normal walking, to have some momentum on it. As I've said before, my project is built entirely using blueprints, and a lot of the blueprints I use are actually the inbuilt ones that Unreal ships with. So for Gabby's movement, it's actually just the default character movement class from Unreal, and I've just been basing all of my stuff off of that. So I didn't think that doing an entire custom movement thing would be, I don't know, I think it'd be a bit too hard for me. I'm not quite at that level. So I thought instead I would try and build something on top of this foundation, some kind of function maybe that could hook into the output of the speed and do some mathematics and some magic to add momentum to it. So that's the approach I took. Turned out to be a lot harder than I thought. I tried to just hack it together and get it to look convincing, but it just didn't feel right and it was quite buggy. So I had to approach perhaps my worst enemy of all, mathematics and physics, and I had to kind of figure out how those worked to make this work properly. Most people would either know this stuff already or would Google it, but lucky for me, my dad happens to be a physicist and has written several books on physics. So I went to him with some of these problems and asked, how can I get this to work? And he sat down with me very patiently, explained a lot of the stuff to me. Now, the math is a bit complicated, but the approach that we decided to take was called an energy balance approach, and that deals with trying to figure out the change in velocity, and knowing that will basically grant Gabby extra momentum or take that momentum away. Now, this was all kind of confusing to me at first, but after many long nights of looking at the maths and the physics of it all, I managed to try and implement it into the game. Now, my dad knows a lot about physics, but he doesn't know a lot about game engines. Because as it turns out, in the real world, frame rate doesn't exist, but in Unreal Engine, it does. And that's very important. And I had this issue once I had done the maths and I was convinced I had done it right. I then noticed that when the game ran at different frame rates, the acceleration and friction would all change. So if I had a lower frame rate, I would actually go faster. And if I had a higher frame rate, I would go slower. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem very fair. That kind of seems broken. It actually took me probably longer than actually figuring out the first bit of maths just to get the frame rate part to work properly. But after many long nights, banging my head against the wall and yelling at my live stream, I eventually got it to work. And now the movement is entirely frame rate independent and it's physically accurate for the most part. And that's very cool. So I want to give a huge thank you to my dad for helping me out with that stuff. I could not have done it without him. So once I got it working for the walking, I was also able to implement it for the sliding very quickly. And then the slide, oh man, the slide was so fun. I was able to build a big slippery slide for Gabby, have her go down it, and I don't know about you, but she sure looks like she's having fun. The next problem I had to deal with was, how do I get this to work with wall running? Because wall running is a bit more complicated than just the base movement. The wall run is my own custom state that I had to make for the character movement component. And getting that to work was a bit more challenging in certain ways. But luckily, a lot of the maths I had done was already there and I could just build on top of it. It's just the challenge was implementing it, because when you're running on a wall, things like difference in height and energy gained and energy lost kind of act a bit differently. And I think another reason this was a bit challenging was because you can't wall run in real life. I mean, at least I can't, maybe some people can. I didn't really know how the laws of physics work in regards to a mechanic that violates the laws of physics, so I had to come up with my own solution of what felt the best from a player perspective. What I ended up doing was, I had it so that when Gabby touches a wall, the frame you touch it, it records how fast you're going and it just redirects that to the direction of the wall and sends you flying across it. So that means if you have a running start and run at a wall and start wall running on it, you will inherit that momentum you had previously. And this is a lot better than the previous way this mechanic worked, in which it would just have you at a set speed. So I think by having it take your previous momentum into account, I think that'll make for some fun gameplay. So that brings us to the final implementation of the momentum system, and that is grind rails. Now, unlike Titanfall, my game has grind rails in it. And previously, they were very static. You jump on the rail and you would just move at a set speed. So I wanted the grind rail system to work a lot like the way I'd done the wall run, just instead of having her run on a wall, she's grinding along a spline path. Now, this system already had a lot of existing problems, so before I even started adding in dynamic momentum, I thought it was really important that I fix some of the more fundamental problems with this mechanic first. Now, some players might have noticed that you'll occasionally teleport on these rails, and that is because the way I coded it was very flimsy. It's using a function called set actor location to move Gabby along a spline path. The spline path being the rail in this case. Now, the problem with this is that set actor location is absolute. It does not care about anything else that's going on in the world. So if, let's say, you were on a rail and something came in and knocked you, set actor location would not know and would not care and would just set you moving on the rail like nothing happened. So to fix this problem, I figured, well, I'm gonna have to stop using set actor location because it's a bit problematic in this use case. And I had to think of another way to move Gabby along a spline path. And this was a bit challenging. There's not a lot of resources out there for this particular feature, but I did manage to find a solution that uses velocity and just pushes Gabby along the rail instead of setting explicitly her location along the rail. So now she can actually interact and collide with things while grinding on rails, and she won't teleport anymore. So once I got that sorted, I was then able to take the momentum function with all the maths on it and apply it to the grind rail system. There's still a few bugs with it that I haven't quite managed to fix yet, but for the most part, it seems to work. When you grind downhill, you do gain speed and momentum, and when you grind up a rail, you will lose speed. So with all of that together, you have this cool kind of interplay of systems where depending on the layout of the land, you can use it to your advantage to gain speed, and then you can make decisions to maintain that speed. So you have to kind of be a bit skillful with how you play the game. You have to constantly be scanning the environment, checking for things, checking for hills, checking for walls and rails to maintain that momentum. And I think that is a new dynamic that wasn't there previously. And I believe it's going to add a lot to the core gameplay. And I think this is the kind of thing it's been missing this whole time. So needless to say, I'm very happy that I have that working now to a degree. I also added a few other things as well, just a few quality of life improvements to some of these mechanics. Some of you may have forgotten, but a while ago, I had a melee combat system set up, but I thought it'd be a good idea to add this system back in and polish it up a bit just to add a bit of variety to the gameplay. The melee system was a little rough as well, and I started to improve it by first making kind of like a lock-on system. Because this is like a high-speed game, Gabby's constantly on the move, and I found that trying to go up to an enemy and do a melee attack, which in this case, Gabby has this roundhouse kick that she does. Doing that is a bit difficult sometimes, especially when aiming, because you have to aim Gabby at the character and then hit the button, and hopefully the hit connects and you do damage. So to mitigate that a bit, just so that people weren't fidgeting around as much, I added like an auto lock-on or a homing feature, which I think is going to make the system a lot better. So now when Gabby is a certain distance away from an enemy, you don't have to aim your mouse in the exact direction of the enemy anymore. You can actually just hit the melee button and she will automatically rotate towards the nearest target and then launch towards them and kick them and send them flying. Speaking of sending them flying, enemies now fly back. By the way, I added that as well. Previously, there was no user feedback at all if Gabby had damaged anything, and I think it did feel very bad. And I didn't really pay much attention to it because I had different priorities to work on at the time, but seeing as I had a bit of time to polish up the game, I now have managed to implement a melee knockback feature. So when Gabby hits an enemy, it will now send them flying backwards. Another little improvement I've made to the melee is that Gabby can now perform a dodge roll to avoid incoming damage. As high mobility as Gabby is, unfortunately, when she's in combat, she is quite vulnerable. When Gabby performs a kick, her movement is limited. She can only really move in the direction of the kick. And that opens her up to being attacked from any other direction, which I thought was a bit unfair in certain cases, and it didn't feel great. So I added an evade feature, so when Gabby is in combat, she can use the shift key to dodge incoming enemy attacks and get her out of the way. I think this feature also might come in handy just for general movement. It's a nice way to rapidly change directions without losing too much speed, so it might come in handy for more than one thing. So that's all of the new movement features I've added. We have ledge grabbing, vaulting, wall climbing, new melee combat features, and the new momentum system. So right when this video goes live, I'm going to be uploading a new build for you guys to test these features out. I've been working on them for a while, and I think it'd be nice to just give them a test run and see what the general consensus is on them. They're probably still going to be a bit buggy. They're not entirely finished yet, but I think they're a huge improvement over the previous mechanics. So keep that in mind, but I would very much appreciate you to try it out and to play it. Now, in this new build, there is a lot more than just new movement features. There's a bunch of new stuff I've added in there, and I'll be covering the new level in part 2 and some extra polish I've done in part 3. So there we have the story for adding momentum-based movement to my indie game without typing any code. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you want to follow this game's development more intently, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Now, this took many months to do. This is all stuff coming from the last 7 months of progress. And during that time, I've actually been live streaming a fair bit of my progress on my Twitch channel. I've been maintaining a weekly schedule now for the last several months, and it's been really fun just hopping in there, getting some work done, and chatting with you guys. So if you don't know about the Twitch channel, be sure to check that out, linked in the video description, so you don't miss out on some juicy, real-time development of Project Feline. No, Gregory, you can't leave. You have to give Gabby the tendies. What are you doing? Check general chat? Okay, yeah, you can't send images. Well, hold on. No, these aren't for me, Greg. No, you don't say me. You don't say my name. You say Gabby's name, okay? These aren't for me. These are Gabby's tendies. Wait, you ate 2 of them? Dude. Unbelievable, man. I also have a few big community announcements I'd like to make, first of which being that I have relaunched my monthly Patreon page. Now, I know I've gone a bit back and forth on my Patreon lately. When I initially made my Patreon, it was mainly to fund devlog episodes, and back when I started doing that, I was releasing episodes once every month, and that was quite convenient with a monthly funding model. But starting this year, I stopped doing monthly uploads just because of the demands of development, and I decided to shut that page down. But I've decided to bring it back up again because a lot of people still wanted a way to support me during this journey. So I've decided to relaunch it with all new reward tiers. At the $3 tier, you'll get exclusive Project Feline updates multiple times a month, and you'll get access to my new private Discord server. So a lot of you know I've been using Discord for quite some time, and Discord's been fun. It's been quite interesting to try and engage with my audience on a more personal level through Discord. However, there's so many members now that have joined, and it's kind of made me a bit stage fright and a bit shy. I tend to find though that I feel a lot more comfortable around smaller groups of people on Discord, so I'm going to be closing down the public Discord server and making a Project Feline subreddit where people can congregate, talk about the game, talk about speedrunning, submit fan art, and all that good stuff. But I still like to be on Discord because it is a nice platform. So I've made a new Patreon-only Discord server that you will get invited to at the $3 tier. $6 a month tier, in addition to the previous stuff, you also get to watch my devlogs 24 hours early. Also, patrons who stay pledged to this tier for 3 months will get an exclusive Project Feline sticker. And at my $15 tier, in addition to that previous stuff, you'll have your name featured in the credits of the next devlog episode. Now, I know I'm not going to be making the episodes monthly, but patrons who pledge to this tier will have their name featured in the next episode that happens to come out. It might come out the same month, might come out a few months later. Either way, your name will be credited, and patrons who stay pledged to this tier for 3 months get an exclusive Project Feline mug. And for the more hardcore people out there, I've made a super special tier just for you. For my $30 tier, in addition to the previous rewards, you'll get exclusive Project Feline merch every 3 months for 1 year of membership. So I've actually designed a whole set of exclusive merch just for this Patreon tier, and it was really fun because I love designing these sorts of things. I've been designing my own shirts since I was 10. So I love being able to give back to the community in that way with some cool, like Japanese inspired designs. So if you want to earn all of the items, then the $30 tier is for you. So while I may not be uploading videos every month, I'm still working on the game and making about the same amount of progress. And if you want to support me while I put myself through that, then I would appreciate that very much. I also want to give a huge thank you to the patrons who have already pledged. I appreciate that so much, and I want you to know that it's your support that allows me to continue documenting this journey. And if you're not a big fan of Patreon, I do have the Casually Gabby Project Feline merch available to everyone for a limited time, so be sure to check that out. If you want to follow development updates, be sure to follow Project Feline on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.